Now let's talk some college football. College football writer, analyst, hosts the number one show for Fox Sports. RJ Young joins us on the Primus Hotline. RJ, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. First, let's get your thoughts on Clay Helton getting fired by USC earlier this week.
Well, thoughts. The guy got fired after a 42-28 loss to Stanford. He was ranked. They weren't. It was the last straw for a man that had done a high-wire escape act for the last 3 years, but it was tremendous ups for this man as well. Remember, he had a Pac-12 championship 2017, finished number 3 in the country with a Rose Bowl win, and then put together a really terrible recruiting class in 2020. Thought he bounced back in 2021 with what I thought was a really great roster, and is still quite an outstanding roster for Dante Williams. But I think many people are just interested to see how Mike Bohn goes about this search and who he decides to hire as his next head coach.
Yeah, that's actually my next question for you, RJ. Who do you think makes the most sense? There's a lot of names, James Franklin being mentioned. Doesn't sound like Urban Meyer is actually going to get involved with this. I know Mario Cristobal was also brought up. Which name makes the most sense to you?
I think you need somebody that's Hollywood and hardworking. I think all three of those guys are still on the list no matter what they say. Until somebody gets hired, you got to include them and you got to make phone calls. And I think that Mario Cristobal is one of those dudes you got to call. James Franklin's one of those guys you got to call. Urban's one of those dudes you got to call. But it's a very interesting job, right? Because it's not just that they need you to win football games, though that's a big part of it. It's that they expect you to win football games and be at home in a mama's living room and an entertainment boardroom. You have to be able to do it all at USC, and there just aren't a whole bunch of guys that foot the bill. As a matter of fact, it's easier to make a list of guys that don't foot the bill than it is guys that do.
RJ Young is with us here on the Primus Hotline, Nick Cattle Show on a Thursday. College football writer, analyst, host, the number one show for Fox Sports. Ryan Day, not necessarily, RJ, standing behind his DC, Kerry Combs this week. What's gone wrong on that side of the football for the Buckeyes?
They gave up over 500 yards of offense at home in their first game in over 650 days. That's real cut and dry. You don't need analysts for that. I think it's also that they thought that they'd be able to out-athlete everybody, right? We know what you're going to be in. We're still going to stop you. They thought they could do that because that was what they were able to do in 2019. But what people forget is that was Jeff Hafley's defense. And he's the guy that tweaked it into such a thing where they could run cover one with a high safety over the top and really get after people with Chase Young on the front end. And then you had Jeff Ucla and I forget the other corner's name off the top of my head, but they both go in the first round. One went to the Raiders, and of course, Ucla went to Detroit Lions. But you had guys, is what I'm saying. Even Jordan Fuller, who was playing the bullet position for them, was drafted in the 7th round by the Los Angeles Rams, and he's become a linchpin dude for them. I think Ryan just wants to find a defensive coordinator, if it's Kerry Coombs, who will 100% put them in the right defense and make sure they don't get beat for big plays. You gave up 160 yards rushing to 2 different tailbacks in 2 games. That has to stop. If you can't stop the run in the Big Ten, you're not going to win the Big Ten championship, and that is the bare minimum for the Buckeyes.
RJ, you surprised how badly Notre Dame has really struggled this early in the season? I know they won both games, but Florida State, Toledo, both close. You surprised by how much they've struggled?
No, it's a new quarterback, right? It's a new quarterback. It's a new defensive coordinator. They're running a different scheme. I'm more surprised that they're 2-0, quite honestly. I've had Florida State to beat them in that game, and they managed to pull it out in the end at Doak Campbell. Full credit to them. And I'm watching that Toledo game, and I'm going, if Toledo was built for this because they beat themselves up with penalties that they never should have had, perhaps you're in that game and you win it at Notre Dame Stadium, and you get to keep the $1 million guarantee. I think Notre Dame is going to get a game against Purdue this weekend, and I wouldn't be shocked if Purdue's able to pull it off. And then you get Wisconsin the following week, which I know is going to be a tremendous game. It's at Soldier Field, Chicago. It's a big game. I think if they survive and advance, they earn everything they get.
RJ Young is with us, college football writer, analyst, host, the number one show for Fox Sports. RJ, Oregon and UCLA have 2 of the biggest wins so far. How do you feel about the Pac-12? They back?
Yeah. I'm not laughing about that. Oregon goes to Columbus in a game that they were picked by everybody to lose, and not only do they win in a devastating fashion. Anthony Brown, who we thought couldn't throw the ball, did exactly that. CJ Verdell, as I mentioned, goes for nearly 200 yards of total offense. They play outstanding defense without their best player and their second best player, or third best player. Noah Sewell is their second best player. So Kayvon Thibodeau is on the bench. And you go get a W against an Ohio State team that put up 28, put up over 600 yards of offense. yeah, that's a good football team. The Pac-12 is in it has an opportunity to do something it hasn't done in 5 years, which is make the playoff. Yes, they're 100% back. And then as far as UCLA having a big win, let's see how good LSU is before we start talking about how it's a big win. It's a win against a ranked opponent, right? And for UCLA, it's a very big win. In the grand scheme of things, I'll be interested to see how they do against a Fresno State team that looked every bit like whooping that Oregon team that just beat Ohio State. So UCLA, I think, would show me more with a win against Fresno State this weekend than what they did in beating a top 25 LSU a couple weeks ago.
Fair point. Will Clemson or Ohio State work themselves back into the playoff?
Not as I see it. I'm about wins, man. We only get 12 games, running the table undefeated, then talk to me. If you lose, you've already cast yourself into my judgment. You're in the judgment of a bunch of people in suits around a boardroom. I don't particularly like that. I'm a fan of a 16-team playoff. I want the scoreboard to be the ultimate arbiter of who wins a national championship. And if you lose a game, I want to look at the teams that didn't, right? And if you don't like the schedules, I'm sorry about you because we put the schedules in advance. And if you want to see the best team rise to the top, give me a 16-team playoff. Everybody gets in who should get in. That would mean your Clemsons and Georgias. I think that Clemson, Ohio State in particular, have to beat people and beat people resoundingly the rest of the way, and then hope. You have to hope that Georgia loses to Florida or somebody along the way, or loses to an Alabama. But even then, we expect a Georgia who's undefeated going into the SEC championship game and lose to Alabama, still get in the playoff just like they did 4 years ago.
Last one for you, RJ. Again, thanks for the time. Does Florida have any chance against Alabama on Saturday?
No. No. Look, it's not just that Alabama is operating like they did last year, which is remarkable given the turnover both on the field and in the coaching staff. It's that I don't trust Florida. I don't know who the starting quarterback is. I don't trust him to throw the ball to beat you. And I don't trust Dan Mullen to go head up against Nick Saban and beat them. This is a team that was loaded last year and lost to a LSU team full of baby Bayou Bengals with 55 men showing up in the swamp at home. And you're expecting me to pick Florida against Alabama? Nah, son, I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. I can't do that. It doesn't make any sense. Now, if Florida goes and gets that W, we'll talk about it differently on Sunday. But today, I expect Alabama to cover the 14.5 and then some.
RJ, thanks for the time, man. Appreciate it. Enjoy your weekend.
All right, Nick. Have a good one.
Thank you. There you go.